What's up guys, and welcome back to another video. So let's say you're renovating your home, you open up the walls and notice you've got a type of pipe that you don't want to keep. Like for example, if you have copper and you want PEX instead, well, there's a few ways to go about it and they all have different approaches. And that's what I want to cover here today. So let's start off with that. Let's say you want to go from copper to PEX. There's a few ways you could do it. The first method would be to sweat or solder a copper to PEX adapter like this one. This is by far the simplest and most reliable way of doing it. A nice trick I like to use when crimping vertically is to first squish the ring so it stays in place and then use the crimpers. Like this, you know it's at the right spot. The second would be to also solder a male or female adapter, thread on the matching PEX adapter, and crimp your PEX. And what's fun with this method is if you need to undo it, it's super easy. Obviously, these methods require some skills, a few tools, and some materials to get it done. And I have a how-to video on how to solder. So if you want to learn everything you need to know to get it done this way, just click on this card to watch that video. You could also use these stainless steel cinch clamps, which work well too. Another way you could do it is by using a shark bite fitting. If you've never used one before, they're pretty easy to use. However, there are some guidelines to follow with these, as with many other joining methods. If it's your first time, I suggest you pause this video and watch this one right here. This guide has everything you need to know on how to install them, where to install them, and a lot of other important things. What's nice is that these fittings are also good for the other transitions in this video, so it's really worth watching. You basically cut the pipe, make sure there's no sharp edges, mark the insertion depth, and insert it. What's nice is that they work on different types of pipes, so there's no special transition fittings needed. So that's if you have copper, but what if you have CPVC? CPVC is a plastic pipe that most often has an off-white color to it with glued connections. So let's say you want to go from CPVC to copper or to PEX. How do you go about it? The first thing to do is to cut the CPVC. Now, when cutting CPVC, you need to be careful. If it's old, CPVC tends to be brittle. So the best way to cut it would be with a hacksaw, as if you had to cut it with cutters like this, it could just snap and make the job a whole lot complicated. So once again, we have a few choices here. The first one would be to use the proper CPVC primer and solvent cement to connect this fitting right here. This is called a CPVC transition fitting and it basically glues on and has a threaded male or female adapter. So you could either use copper or PEX from here. And lastly, you could use shark bite fittings as they're also compatible with CPVC. Now, what if you have polybutylene piping? POLYB was used in more than 6 million homes between 1978 and 1995, which was this gray pipe right here. And it was discontinued due to it becoming very brittle and leaking. So a lot of people had to either transition from it or completely remove it. So assuming you'll be transitioning to another plastic pipe like PEX, you'll need a special fitting called a repair or splice coupling, as PB fittings aren't sold anymore. This special coupling has a POLYB connection on one end and a PEX connection on the other, and this is one of the 3 approved fittings to use for this transition. The other one is once again a shark bite fitting, but this one has a slight tweak to it. There's one universal side, and the other is specifically for POLYB, as it has a slightly larger inside diameter than PEX or copper, so the liner or stiffener inside has to be the correct one. If you're looking to go from POLYB to copper or CPVC, you'll need these fittings right here that could either be directly soldered or cemented on. The only thing is that they're pretty hard to find. So the best option is to just use a proper shark bite fitting and you'll be good to go. And the last transition is from galvanized piping to all of the above. Galvanized piping is pretty easy to identify. It has a silverish finish to it, it's magnetic as it's steel, and it uses threaded fittings as a joining method. Now, transitioning from galvanized is a little bit trickier, as you might need to undo a close-by fitting to gain access to some good threads, cut the pipe with a power tool to use a special fitting, or even rethread the pipe as a last resort, which I'll show you how to do. So first off, let's get the galvanized piping ready. The best scenario is if you have a fitting close by. So the first thing you do is cut the pipe and try to unscrew the fitting. Now, it's possible that it's seized in rust and corrosion, so a good trick to aid at undoing it is to heat it up a bit and use some penetrant. This will loosen things up a bit and could make things easier. There we go. Once you got some good clean threads to work with, if you want to transition to PEX or CPVC, you just use the same adapters as before. And if you want to go to copper, you'll need a brass coupling in between or a straight up brass nipple if you have. Let me explain why. A brass coupling is a must when going from two dissimilar metals such as copper and steel. If you don't use one, galvanic corrosion will take place and eventually corrode the pipe and create a pinhole leak. So that's if you have access to the threads. But what if you don't? The best way would be to get a welder to weld an adapter on, but that's expensive. So there's a fitting called a dresser coupling that you could buy that's basically a compression fitting but for steel and uses gaskets instead of a compression ferrule. It's pretty simple to use. You'll need a small nipple with some threads on one end and 2 wrenches. Just make sure there's no sharp edge on the pipe after you cut it and that the coupling is centered with both pipes. And you just need to tighten it. These are good up to 150 psi of pressure, so nothing really high. If you decided to use these, you'd also need to make sure that the pipes don't pull out by properly strapping it in the wall, and then you could proceed with your transition. Just as a side note, shark bite fittings cannot be used on galvanized steel as they aren't made to. Now, if you don't want to use these methods and you prefer making your own threads, here's how. You'll need a manual pipe threader, which could be rented for around $20 a day, a pipe wrench, and some oil. All you do basically is thread with one hand and use the other to hold the pipe for it not to undo itself until the face of the pipe reaches the face of the die, and you're done. And that's how you transition from one pipe to another for most potable water systems. If you want to see a video like this on drain pipes, let me know in the comment section below and I'll start working on it. If you enjoyed this video and got to complete your project, smash the like button, share it, and subscribe for more cool upcoming videos like this one. And until the next one, thanks for watching.